You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Okay, I'm here with Tommy Mayfield, co-founder and CEO of Wyndy, a mobile app that makes it simple to find, book, and pay pre-vetted, background-checked college babysitters. How about that? Fantastic. It's always fun to have young startups here on Southpod Rise of a Region. It's kind of the sweet spot where we dig down into what it takes to launch a company, how you get the idea, where you are currently, how you find the content, contacts, capital opportunities, everything you need to scale. So, Tommy, you're from Birmingham, correct? And you live there today as well.
I do. I'm a native of the Magic City. So
when you were a kid, were you exposed to any entrepreneurs, anyone in the family? Have you had that bug? Because I know you're a law school graduate and worked for law firms, and we'll dive into that in a second. But, can you remember being inspired by any entrepreneurs?
I feel like I hear a lot of stories of early entrepreneurs who were, running lemonade stands or whatever when they were 5 years old and always dreamed of owning their own business. And I'm really not that story. My father is an entrepreneur, so I do think some of that kind of runs in my veins. But I've had a pretty unique career path and resume. I went to Vanderbilt for college and then graduated, was here for a few years working in Birmingham. And then, as you mentioned, I moved to DC and actually spent a year working for an international human rights group called IJM. Really cool organization. They basically have teams of lawyers and investigators and social workers around the world, and they help rescue people from slavery, sex trafficking, you name it. So really compelling work. From there, I ended up deciding to go to law school and went to law school at the University of Virginia, finished up in 2009. And then my wife and I moved back here to Birmingham, and I spent about 7 years practicing law at a big corporate firm here before taking the plunge into Wyndy. So I think the idea of trying to be creative about solving problems is something that I've always had an interest in. But I'm certainly not someone who graduated from college and said, my goal in life is to be an entrepreneur. So.
Love it. So Nashville, DC, Charlottesville, then you return with your wife, Ginger, to Birmingham. Give us the origin story. What was the inspiration behind Wyndy? And was there a eureka moment, or were you searching to solve a problem?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. So the origin of Wyndy was really about solving a problem that my wife and I had. So I was an attorney keeping long hours. My wife was actually getting her master's degree at night, and we had 2 daughters under the age of 3. So needless to say, our lives were very hectic, and they were made a lot more difficult by, the difficulties in trying to find babysitters. And really at that point, we were doing the same thing that parents had been doing when we graduated from college in the early 2000s, which was we try to meet a handful of sitters through offline relationships, put their numbers in our phones, send a bunch of text messages, and then have to stop by the ATM late at night or scrounge around for the checkbook to pay them. And, it kind of occurred to us at some point, like we're living in this world with apps like Lyft and Shipt where we can, get a ride or get our groceries delivered with a tap of a button. Why wasn't there an app that could get me a trusted babysitter just as easily? So that was part of it, was just trying to solve our own problem. And then early on, I went and talked with another Southern tech entrepreneur, Cam Duty, who's one of the founders of Bellhops. They're based in Chattanooga. They're an on-demand moving platform that uses college guys as their labor force. And so I went and talked to him, and he sort of talked about the concept of disrupting a traditional market, which is what they're trying to do in the moving space. And it really just sort of crystallized for me, like there is no more traditional space in the babysitting space. So, it took us probably about 3 or 4 months from the time we kind of came up with the idea to, doing the market research, looking at the competitive landscape, doing focus groups and interviews with both sides of our potential user base. And we eventually just felt like there was a real opportunity that we could capitalize on. And so we took the plunge.
How old were your kids at that time?
So they were, I guess, about 5 and 3 at that point.
You sort of felt like you had a focus group every time somebody came over to babysit. You could sit down and talk through the idea and the concept and find out if it would be adopted.
Yeah, and a lot of our favorite babysitters were local college students, again, that we met through random connections. So we interviewed a lot of those folks and asked them kind of what are the problems that you experience on your side of the market, and what are your thoughts about the ways that, we could go about solving those. And I think that's really, for any marketplace, if you only focus on one side of the market, it's not going to work, right? So we've tried to be very intentional from day one and saying, we want to make parents really happy and give them a great experience, but we really also want to serve our sitters, who we call Wyndies, well, and really give them an opportunity to, build a flexible part-time income while they're in school, make great connections with families, in the city they call home during college, and really build a living resume. Because at this point, we have Wyndies who've done hundreds of jobs on our platform and have a 5-star rating. If they can graduate and go set up an interview with a prospective employer and say, I did well in school, I was involved on campus, but I also did 150 Wyndy jobs and had a 5-star rating, what they're showing that employer is, I know how to work with people and I know how to manage my time. And that's pretty much, those are pretty much, if you got those two skills, you can be successful in just about anything you do. So
strong resume builder. So my wife, Sunny, and I are also co-founders, and we have 2 kids, and we've experienced the same, challenges with babysitters and reaching out to various colleges. But let's walk us through that gap between having that idea and that problem. It sounds like that neither one of you are software engineers. Is that correct?
That is correct. So not a tech background.
Yeah. So you're not a software engineer, but you are a man in search of a solution for a problem.
Yeah.
Walk us through, in 2016, you and Ginger are doing your market research. You're finding some mentors and friends. What was the next step in getting the application built?
Yeah. So, I guess this is an encouragement to others who are thinking about starting a tech-enabled platform who don't have a tech background. When we started, I really had no idea if all apps were built in Silicon Valley or, I knew nothing. But thankfully, through, the startup community here, I was able to connect with there's a handful of great development shops here in Birmingham, and was able to sort of start meeting with them, exploring, which one might be a good partner, and then ended up settling on a group here in town called Airship. So worked with them starting in November of 2016, all the way through, well, really until fairly recently, but we started building the app in November of 2016. In January, we rolled out kind of a landing page. So we started pre-registering parents in Birmingham and onboarding our sitters, because there's an onboarding process there, and then actually launched the app in March of 2017. But then they also supported us until November of this year is when we brought on our CTO. So we've now grown our team and been able to bring the development in-house, but they were a great partner for us in those early days.
And this is a unique platform where you hold the IP on it. It's not a white labeled app, right?
That's right. We built it all.
What are some of the hiccups along the way, as you're determining your users, the market, you're doing your research? What did you have to overcome in that development phase, especially in the early phases? Yeah,
I think I'll step back a little bit from that question, but one of the big challenges for both Ginger and myself, in 2016 was, here we are in the South where, I've got a respectable job as a corporate lawyer. And then I start telling people, hey, I'm leaving that. I'm going to go build a babysitting app. And, early on, I got a lot of sort of, well, that's a cute side project. Or people would ask me, are you doing that full time? And so I think one of the early challenges is just really getting people to take you seriously. And then obviously also with the nature of our business, we knew from day one that if we're going to make this work, we've really got to build a platform that parents like you and me will trust. And so we were very intentional about, and I'm happy to talk through this further, but sort of trying to build a platform that would engender that trust among our target parents. So those are two kind of high level challenges. I think on the development side, I'm a big believer that the devil's in the details. So it's one thing at a very high level to say, let's build an app to connect, parents and college babysitters. Like, that's not a novel idea at all. The real challenge is how do you execute on that idea? How do you build it out from a functionality standpoint to where it really delivers what your users want? And so, those first few months of development was really about getting down into the brass tacks and figuring out how are we going to make this work in a way that will please our users. And we've obviously learned a lot and grown a lot and improved a lot since then. But those were kind of the big challenges early on.
So earlier, walk us through 2018. You've got the software platform built. You enter the Velocity Accelerator cohort. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we participated in the Velocity Accelerator, which ran from January to April of this year. So,
okay, and they walked you through how to scale the platform and how to, or were you raising capital? I mean, what were you needing?
Yeah, so we were, we again launched in the spring of 2017. So we'd had about, I guess, 6 or 9 months of being sort of out in the world and before we started Velocity. So in the fall of 2017 is when we actually started expanding to new markets. So we're currently in 7 markets across Alabama, Tennessee, and Virginia. And we'll be launching 3 new markets in the next month or so, Dallas, Fort Worth, Raleigh, Durham, and Atlanta. But so we kind of were probably farther along than some of our fellow cohort companies. We had customers, we had revenue, we had a product. But the Velocity Accelerator was a great opportunity to really connect with some mentors and get some coaching on, what are the metrics and the different things that we really need to be focused on as we try to think about scale and about raising outside capital. So as soon as Velocity ended at the end of April, we sort of kicked off a fundraising effort. And I'm pleased to say we closed it about a month or so ago. So we raised $1 million seed round, which has enabled us to kind of grow our team and, focus on continuing to expand our footprint.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's the competitive landscape look like?
So it's interesting. There are a handful of sort of what I would refer to as incumbent players. There's really 3 big companies. Care.com is the one that most people are familiar with. And then there's one called Urban Sitter out in California, another one called Sitter City based in Chicago. Those companies have been around for a while, and to varying degrees, they're really just more of a directory. So essentially anyone can just sign up and create a profile and say, I want to be a caregiver. And so it really puts the onus on the parent to do all the due diligence around who are these people? Is this somebody I can, entrust my kids to? There are also a handful of other smaller startups like us who are doing similar things. There's a couple that I sort of call neighborhood apps. So they're basically premised on this notion of, you have 3 babysitters in your phone. I've got 3 in my phone. Let's put them both on this platform. And now we have 6. So it's kind of more driven by, your existing network. And there are a couple that are trying to do almost exactly what we're doing. But we feel like we have, built a platform that combines trust and technology in a pretty unique way. And so, we feel like we're well positioned to compete. And the reality is, about 97% of the $15 billion that's spent a year on babysitting is still spent on the old school traditional way of babysitting. So, I always tell our team, our success in my mind is not based on capturing market share from a competitor. It's really about bringing the majority of parents in the U.S., into this new world of using technology to solve this problem.
Your revenue model is based on taking a percentage when the parent books the sitter?
That's right. So we're a transaction fee-based model.
And as you spread to each of those additional markets, was your marketing campaign based upon a digital strategy, or was your rollout more word of mouth and organic? How did you spread?
It was a little bit of both, but at the point that we started expanding, we still had a very small team. We had very little in the way of resources. So most of it was just organic, tapping into communities where we had connections and felt like we could, make partnerships that would be good strategic partnerships. So for example, in Nashville, it was nice that obviously my wife and I both went to Vanderbilt. So we had that connection. to that university. But also, we partnered with some other companies who are trying, who have similar target users that we do, and did some cross promotions and that kind of thing. So that helped us kind of get it going.
Great. So walk us through the vetting process and the security aspect of it. It sounds like that's one of your key differentiators. How does that function?
Yeah. So, I always tell people we wanted to create this app to solve our own problem, right? So I want to build a platform that I, as a parent, can trust. And as a dad of two daughters, I wanted to build a platform that I would be comfortable with my daughters, participating and using it as Wyndy's when they get older. So as far as our vetting process for the sitters goes, I kind of like to say there's three main components. So first, we start with a sort of trusted segment of the population, which is, local college students at top tier universities. Second, we sort of do the pre-vetting for parents. So we have an application process where sitters have to verify their EDU address, provide us with a variety of information. We do sort of a video interview, and then we also have them all go through a background check. So they're all background checked before they can access the platform. And then the third thing is we really try to build tools into the app to engender trust. So, we have a rating system, as you would expect with the marketplace, but we also have a social connections component. So if you and I are both parents on the platform, we can connect with one another, and then I can see all the Wyndy's you've used, how many times you've used them, and the rating that you've given them. So, in the world before Wyndy, a trusted recommendation from a friend was usually the most likely thing that would lead to you having a new babysitter. So we've sort of taken that concept and just put technology on top of it so that it's seamless.
And what's the story behind the name?
So Wyndy is a nod to Wyndy Darling, the character from Peter Pan, who sort of acts as the surrogate mother to the Lost Boys. I wish I could take credit for that, but unfortunately, Ginger, my wife, gets the credit for that one.
My wife would love that. My son was in the play last year. He was one of the Lost Boys at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's dive into Birmingham for a second. So part of what Dig South, the parent company of SouthPod, does is focus on bringing different startup founders, executives, entrepreneurs, and experts together, connecting them across the Southeast in particular. And I always love to hear, from an entrepreneur, their perspective on the ecosystem, the environment, the support they can find, the camaraderie. So what does Birmingham look like in that regard?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be in Birmingham as an entrepreneur. Again, even though I'm from Birmingham and have spent 6 or 7 years here before starting Wyndy. The world I inhabited was sort of outside of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I was really pleasantly surprised when I sort of came into the fold, what was already here and sort of the amount of support that I was able to get from other entrepreneurs who had been down this road. And so that was really great. And I think that's continuing to grow. Obviously we've had big news, been in the news a fair amount over the last few months, with Shipt, which started here, their acquisition by Target. I think it's really, a big part of creating an ecosystem in my mind is you just have to get enough people that really believe in the vision and believe that you can build something really exciting. And so things like, Target acquiring Shipt, I think serve as a catalyst for that. I can remember when we started Wyndy 2 years ago, I wrote a blog post for someone, and I mentioned, Instacart is out there. They had raised $675 million in venture funding, and here's Shipt based in Birmingham. Back then, the notion that we in Jones Valley, which is where Birmingham is, could compete with Silicon Valley in a technology space seemed pretty crazy. But I really think as we're continuing to grow the ecosystem here, with things like the Shipt acquisition, as well as, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but Birmingham just recently launched a new $25 million seed fund. Charles Barkley is actually one of the investors in it. So, creating that capital for early stage companies in Birmingham and across the state of Alabama, really, I think is really exciting.
I love it. Yeah, having that celebrity touch, and of course the brand name of Target, acquiring Shipt, all those factors really give you a boost in national profile. Very good. Well, is there anything that we missed that we should touch on? And where do you see yourself in 3 years and potentially 5 years? What are the long-term goals for Wyndy?
Yeah, I think we covered most of what we needed to. Again, I'll just reiterate, we're planning to launch our 3 new markets, Dallas, Fort Worth, Raleigh, Durham, and Atlanta over the next 6 weeks or so. So if folks are hearing this and are interested, particularly in those markets, just going to the App Store. We're obviously iOS and Android, so just search for Wyndy, download the app, and that will sort of, 1, save your spot in the event we have a wait list, but 2, it helps us just kind of get ramped up so that we're ready to go on launch date. So that would be great. And then as far as looking ahead, our goal really in the next 12 months is to continue to refine our playbook around expansion, with the goal of, getting to the spring of next year and saying, okay, we've really figured this out. Now it's just a matter of sort of pouring fuel on the fire. So we envision, hopefully raising some additional capital and then trying to grow even more aggressively starting in the fall of 2019. So that's really about as far as I can get at this point. But, I always say in 5 years, if it's not Wyndy, it's going to be something. But the way that you and I have handled the babysitting dilemma for the last 10 years is just not what, folks 10 years younger than us are going to do. So I think there's a real opportunity here, and we're excited about having the opportunity to pursue it.
Well, in less than 2 years, you've raised $1 million, launched a company in multiple cities, and you're solving a problem for a lot of parents. So I congratulate you on that, Tommy.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for being our guest today on South Pod, Rise of a Region.
Thanks so much.